Well, Michael Milne, thank you so much for joining us. To introduce you by way of background, Michael is the Executive Director at the University of Sydney Centre in China. He's responsible for supporting the implementation of the University of Sydney's China strategy and ensuring that the centre acts as a trusted partner and source of business development expertise for the university's education, research and engagement objectives. For those that don't know, the Sydney University Centre in China is a wholly owned foreign entity of the university, and of course the centre serves as a research and education hub to increase intellectual exchange and collaboration with Chinese partners, and of course works to sustain long-term, meaningful and effective relationships with all kinds of stakeholders in this part of the world. Michael, thanks so much for making the time to talk to AustCham Shanghai.
You're welcome, Jack. Thanks for having me.
Well, maybe I can just ask as a bit of an introduction. Maybe you can just introduce the centre in China, what it does day to day, how long it's been there, and really your role piecing it all together.
Sure. The centre's been there since 2016, so it's not that old. It's still in sort of startup phase in many respects, and they're still scaling up. And as you said in your intro, we're there to support the university's strategy broadly. And on a day-to-day basis, that really means that we're on the student side, working with the university to present the university's, value proposition, if you like, to potential students, so to encourage enrolments, but also then supporting students through various mechanisms. So we provide a great first point of contact for prospective and current students and their families. We also offer various kinds of support through developing internships and career support and advice. And this is something that we're really keen to do, and the university is keen for us to do, is to really scale that up. And we also do something called in university industry community development units, which is these multidisciplinary projects where we grab a bunch of students, bring them over to China and get them to work on a real life problem in China. At the other end of the student journey, we're there to support our alumni in China. And so we again offer them a range of support services and make sure that we're keeping them connected into what is their university community, and they're increasingly an important part of our larger community. On the research side, we're there to foster research collaborations between University of Sydney researchers and researchers in China, be it through universities in China or research centres and institutes. We have a particular focus on research collaborations that are of a sort of commercialisation tech transfer type. And so we work on pulling those things together in a very active sense. I have business development staff who work in that space. In Jiangsu province, which is where we're located because we're in Suzhou, we work with JITRI, the Jiangsu Industry Technology Research Institute, on those collaborations, as well as using other mechanisms. And we've got about, I think last count, about 7 collaboration proposals in the pipeline at the moment. And they're ranging in value from about sort of, what is it, could be as small as 200,000 renminbi to millions of renminbi and millions of Australian dollars. And so that side of the business is pretty exciting, actually. And we do engagement generally. We're there as the representative office. We talk to government, we talk to industry and government in China, as well as, Australian government. So we work with DFAT and Austrade, work with industry, establish industry connections, both from a research collaboration perspective and to be able to place our students either through internships or these collaborative student units.
And from a university perspective, China is pretty important to your wider strategy, the overarching goals of the organisation. You described the centre in startup phase. How important is China? Why have a centre? Where do you want to take it? And what's the experience been like the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear for the university that setting up a centre, setting up a physical presence in China was important because of the importance of China to the university from a research and education perspective. So on the research side, for example, we publish about 1,000 papers a year in collaboration with Chinese researchers. And I think we actually publish the largest number per year of the G08. On the student side, as everybody knows, most Australian universities, we're no exception, has a significant proportion of international students. Roughly about 70% of our international cohort is international students from China. China is also a net producer of knowledge these days, particularly in the technology science areas. And they've overtaken the US in that space. So, China is a big complex place that is investing huge amounts in education and research. Australia is relatively speaking, a much smaller, running at a much smaller scale. We can't afford to ignore the USs of the world, China, the UK, Europe. And so China's, as important as those other places, but has assumed a larger importance just because of the nature of things and the way in which China has developed. So for the centre then, it's about us supporting the university to engage in those research collaborations, find those research partners, identify those opportunities, and steward those arrangements, provide the expertise in country for how to do that, and support our academics to do that. Provide that, it's a bit of a hackneyed phrase, but we're the conduit or the bridge, if you like, between Australia and China for those purposes. And on the student side, as I said, it's about us being the face for the university for that value proposition, which is a pretty good one for Chinese students to come to Australia to study.
And a final question on the centre's physical presence in China. Why Suzhou? I mean, obviously, for so many Australians, we understand well Hong Kong, maybe Beijing, Shanghai, or Shenzhen, maybe the pandas in Chengdu. Suzhou is an amazing part of the world. It is really a powerhouse and very open to foreign investment. But was there anything in particular that made that decision easier for the university to choose to be based there?
Yeah. But the university went through a pretty rigorous process for deciding, where it was going to establish the centre. Jiangsu province, as you know, and most people would know, is a powerhouse in China. And if you look at sort of GDP numbers, per capita GDP, it's Jiangsu province and Guangdong really are the standouts, and Shenzhen, of course, is sitting within that. So, from the point of view of a sort of where is it happening in China in a broader sense, Jiangsu province is significant. It's not far from Shanghai. In fact, Shanghai used to be part of Jiangsu province until about 1920. I'm just trying to remember, maybe 21, 23, something like that, when they lifted it off. And so, these days, it's not a slow train trip as it was when I was there many, many years ago. It's a very quick trip into Shanghai, and it's very easy to access Shanghai. There's also the fact that Suzhou Industrial Park has been established there, and it is a deliberate attempt by Jiangsu province and the national government to establish a high-tech hybrid zone, education and industry, and it's proving to be a successful model. And so there were some good reasons to join other foreign universities, such as Oxford, in that space. Given the industrial base there, given the emphasis that we have on these commercialisation, tech transfer type research collaborations, it felt like a natural, a pretty good natural solution. The fact that we're there doesn't stop us working across the country, though. So that's why we're called the centre in China. We're not called the Suzhou Centre, and that's because we do work across the country. So we're working on a collaboration opportunity, for example, at the moment in Shenzhen. And we work across the country as we need to support our researchers.
Right. No, it's a great part of the world, and it makes, I think, a lot of sense to also move beyond, sometimes the marquee city and get out there a bit closer to what is, a powerhouse economy, as you say. Jiangsu is a sizable contributor to China's GDP, and also the trade relationship with Australia more broadly. Michael, I want to talk to you a bit about education in 2020, or you can talk to me and our members about education in 2020. I think it goes without saying, as a bit of background, international education and our relationship with China is incredibly important in terms of the tuition and the experiences that we provide. So many students who normally go to Australia, study, they might then work or even become Australians eventually and stay and build a life in what is really a powerhouse set up for becoming a global citizen. Our education reputation is really world standard. This year has obviously brought incredible challenges. Where were you when you first sort of realised this wasn't going to be like any other year?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jack. I was actually in China. Yeah, there was a moment actually. I remember I was in Shanghai just before leaving on the 11th of January, and we'd just concluded our in-country pre-arrival sessions for students who were inbound into Australia. And I was about to fly out to Germany for a couple of weeks. And I remember sitting in Shanghai, having heard seen some of the sort of, messaging, if you like, that was going on around there's something happening in Wuhan. Because it was apparent then. And I remember distinctly being in places and hearing people sniffling and stuff and thinking, oh, is that a problem? And then I got to Germany and I was watching the situation. Of course, my team went into lockdown as everybody did in China with the new year. And on the 21st of January, I emailed my manager here, the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Education, the chair of my board, and said that I'm not going to fly back into Shanghai to China as originally intended on the 29th. And by the way, we need to start planning for the impact on international students coming into Australia. And so for me, that was the moment, the 21st. And I think Wuhan went into lockdown on the 23rd.
Yeah, that's right. That's very early. I mean, it feels like, I've been here the whole year, and it feels like obviously initially it was a China challenge, and it was really foreign businesses or organizations grappling with what that would mean for their structures or their operations in China. And then, as you say, so much of your operation here is about what happens back in Australia, and there's obviously got to be a flow-on effect and an impact. Talk to me about what this year's meant for the university. Obviously, there's been challenges locating students in China, those that were able to make it to Australia to get to class, others that have been not able to get on a plane and enter the country. What's that meant for the university, for the student experience, and for your day job, frankly?
Yeah. Look, it's been as it has for everybody this year, been a real challenge, and it's been one that has been a sort of on a daily kind of. It's a bit Groundhog Day, but it's also not. I mean, we've actually worked every day to work out what's going to happen and what's possibly happen and how we need to respond. And I think, as you know, it's a great human trait that we tend to try to remain fairly optimistic through challenges that hit us. But this one tried everybody's optimism to the limit, I think. And I think sometimes our optimism got the better of us. And so, it was unclear to begin with, certainly in January and then into February, really what the impact was going to be. Was this going to be something that was going to really blow up, or was it something that was going to be controlled fairly quickly? For us, it meant students scrambling to get over here, international students. And there was a wild scramble at the start, getting on any plane they could, getting through a third country when the travel bans were imposed, all kinds of things happening. And then when COVID became a problem here, we saw students, parents telling their children, international students, get on a plane and come back home, right, and go back. So it was a pretty crazy time. And initially the challenge was for us that our international students weren't able to make it onto campus. And we looked like we were going to have, two classes of students, those on campus and those who were off campus. But very quickly things equalised in a kind of strange way, and everybody ended up being online. And that was the great challenge, was to pivot very quickly to deliver almost all of our curriculum online for everybody. And we did that pretty well, actually, including in China. So we got around some of the digital challenges of delivering content in China. And we've done pretty well to do that. And we've been able to provide them with Chinese students with particular support services. So we established a peer support program for all of our Chinese students who are learning online in China. So they've got their Mandarin-speaking peers who are located here, and keeping in touch with them through groups on WeChat and through other mechanisms on a regular basis. So I think we've done pretty well. There was a consequence, of course. We lost, students deferred, as some students didn't actually complete their enrolment. So some students suspended, some deferred, some dropped off. So it's been a bit of a mixed result, of course, and we all know about the financial impact on universities because that's been in the press for some time now. From the centre's perspective, our job was to reassure our Chinese stakeholders, to reassure our Chinese students on behalf of the university and to support the university's efforts to get its teaching online in China, which we did through a lot of system testing and a whole bunch of other things. And then working out what kind of services that we could provide to our Chinese students to kind of keep them going. So some of these career support services we've been running, we've been doing WeChat posts on the talent policies in Tier 1 cities for returnees, which has been a blockbuster kind of program of posts that have gone really well. And, you know, communicating the university's message to its stakeholders. So lots of posts with the VC speaking directly to our students and parents and so on. So really supporting the university to manage.
And how's the sentiment at the moment? I mean, obviously, it feels like we've broken the back of the crisis scenario. So you sort of paint a good picture of, yes, it was a bit chaotic. There was a scramble from businesses, individuals, just trying to get a new lay of the land. Where are we at now with the students that are enrolled? They're doing online classes. You know, you're providing remote support. Is there a view that they might finish their degrees from China? They might get on a plane next year. Has that uncertainty gone or dissipated at all, or are we still just, I suppose, wading our way through it?
Yeah, I think I should say that I don't know first. I don't have that particular crystal ball. Look, I think it has settled a bit. It's settled a lot, actually. It's still distressing and disruptive for many people. I know through the contacts that I have with Chinese students directly that, you know, many of them are keen to come back as soon as they can.
Yeah.
What's really interesting at the moment is for semester two, we have good numbers of students enrolling to commence in session 2 and return in session 2, including with international, and good numbers coming from China. So I've been involved in running the what we've now called the pre-commencement program, which is a virtual program for our international Chinese students in China to commence their online studies with the university. And we've had great responses to those virtual sessions that we're running. So that's, you know, registrations in the 500 or 600s. We've run, I think, 4 of those this week. I've got another one immediately after our chat today, and then we're putting on an extra one on Monday. So there's, you know, that's encouraging, I think, for the university and for the sector. The students are the same. The Q&A in these sessions is fantastic. They're asking all of the same questions they would ask in person. Their enthusiasm is coming through the Q&A sessions. They're expressing a desire to get out here as soon as that's possible, and they're saying, when can we come out? You know, they're all the thanks that they're expressing, the gratitude they're expressing online for what we're providing them is quite remarkable. I've not actually seen anything like that before. So there's, you know, hope sitting in that thing that's worth recognising. We've still got a way to go. You know, we don't believe that. You know, it would be surprising if we get students out here for semester 2.
Yeah.
People were talking about the corridor for international students and so on and so forth. That remains a challenge, especially if COVID numbers are worrying in Australia, which they are in Melbourne at the moment in particular, Victoria in particular. Then we've got to start to think about semester 1 next year. Are we going to have in-country, face-to-face, back to normal in 2021? And that's an unknown, but we're working for whatever the situation will be. We're trying to move back towards a level of face-to-face activity on campus, so staff are starting to come back onto campus from this week slowly. But that also will be different. It won't be everybody just coming back to the office as they had been before.
Can I ask you, Michael, a little bit about, I suppose, the debate in Australia about education this year has impacted hospitality, tourism, education, some of the key sectors that have been hit the hardest and the earliest, and unfortunately, potentially going to be the longest hit as well. The University of Sydney, I know that you shared with me prior to this, government funding for the organisation has decreased from 86% of income in 1990 through to 28% in 2018. Obviously, what that has meant is international students, and that market has become an incredibly important part of the university's revenue stream. How would you summarise, I suppose, the views of your organisation, leadership that you've done, the conversations that are being had with your senior colleagues in Sydney in that debate around how universities should be supported, funded, and exposed internationally, given what we're going through at the moment?
Yeah, it's a big question, and I think that the figure that you quoted there at the start of that question, Jack, is the important one, is that for higher education, government funding has declined significantly over a number of years. The demand in universities has not dissipated. So we still have to maintain buildings. We still have to have world-class teaching and research facilities. And in fact, these things are becoming more expensive to provide, not cheaper.
Yeah.
And if our community in Australia wants a world-class university system that does world-class research, solving some of the greatest challenges of our time, working with collaborators overseas, if we're to provide the highest possible standard of education to our domestic students, as well as other students that we can welcome to Australia, then that costs money. And the level of funding for research and for training at the moment, education, is not sufficient to cover costs. Unlike, say, the University of California system, the University of California system, research is fully funded. Research is not fully funded in Australia. And also the amount of research funding available is very low. So, for example, the Future Fellowship Program, 15% of applicants were successful in this latest round. That's a very, very low number of people receiving those kinds of research grants. So that creates a challenge for us financially. Yes, international students have proven to be a great source of revenue, but they're more than that. They actually contribute to our community in really valuable ways. Yes. They make it a global institution. And that's what's really great about having international students. So it's not a simple case of saying they're there for the money. There's a demand internationally for an education in Australia because an education that you have in Australia has high value because it's such an excellent education, especially at a university like the University of Sydney. Yes, that brings the revenue in that we need to support our operations across the diverse range of what we do. And the need for other sources of income outside domestic student revenue and whatever government grants we do get, and philanthropy and so on, is going to remain. That's not going to change unless we end up with a much different system than we currently have. I mean, you would have to reduce the size of individual institutions dramatically, and the sector, in my view, significantly, if we're not going to be if we're not going to have these other sources of income. Yeah. The challenge for us now is, with the pandemic and with the inability of our international students to get here, where does that leave us? How long is that going to go on? And what's the impact going to be? We're playing that out. We're doing the best we can, as the rest of the sector is. But I think we've got some conversations to have internally, but also with government and within the sector about where we go from here.
Yeah, most definitely. That is the debate, and it's a good summary of sort of how the university's approaching that. It's clear the universities have never been more important. University of Sydney, I think, is Australia's first university. It's got such a long history.
University.
And yet some, government funding shrinking over time can create serious challenges for the revenue model or the operating the standard that underpins that. So it's going to be a debate for, I'd imagine, the next decade at least.
Yeah, and I think too the criticism that we've received as a sector has been unjustified. You know, there's been a claim that we've been overly reliant on China, but you know, if you think about other sectors of the economy, export industries that are almost entirely reliant on a China market, those sectors have not been criticised. There's been a little bit of, you know, gnashing of teeth about the impact and the challenge going forward, especially when we're talking some of the tariffs that have been imposed and difficulties getting a product in and things like this. But you know, given the overall contribution the university sector makes to the economy, which is substantial. I mean, you know, for every you know, dollar or student we get in the door here from overseas, they make a massive contribution to the wider economy. It's the hospitality side, it's, you know, food and beverage, it's accommodation, it's tourism. I mean, international students, when they get here, they've got this wonderful country to travel around and experience. And so they contribute a huge amount. That's why we're number 4. The sector is number 4 export industry in the country. And it has a multiplier effect on the economy that I don't think really people understand very well. But you can start to see it around the place when you see the for lease signs in the windows at the moment of various residential areas.
Yeah, the multiplier factor is everything. I think Australia is known as the most Asian nation outside of Asia. We're such a multicultural part of the world, and China's a huge part of that. And obviously the universities don't just train or educate individuals, they do add so much to a wider society and the business that, you know, is the backbone of the country. So let's long hope that may continue. Michael, just a final question: the future of you know, the tuition that you're providing and the online element of that. Do you see the online element continuing? Are we going to see a blur of the face-to-face engagement and on-campus learning? Is this something that you think the university will continue with for the foreseeable future or beyond the pandemic?
Yeah, this is a discussion I think that's going on within the sector at the moment, and I think we've actually learned some things as a result of the pandemic. We've seen how a crisis can drive innovation in a number of areas, and how some of what we have done traditionally face-to-face could potentially be done online. But there's not going to be a replacement for the on-campus experience, the interaction that students have with each other from various backgrounds through the clubs and societies. That's going to remain, you know, an important part of people's education. So, you know, we've had online content for some time now as part of students' degrees. So that's not new. The way that we deliver that content into the future, how much of it we have, that will depend on a range of factors. And I think people are still working on that. But I think it does show that the hybrid in-person model is going to be one that we continue to work with. And I think we'll continue to explore the opportunities there and just continue to refine that with a view to the quality of the outcome. Because for us, you know, we're continually talking about the student experience. What is the student? We've got to ensure that our students have the best possible experience, both from a purely educational perspective, as well as a wider perspective as a human being, as a student at that time in their life, is interacting with the best minds in the country as well as with each other. So that's the campus is not dead. The campus is going to remain a really important part of people's experiences and what we do and what we deliver.
In many respects, the experience that you're providing for your Chinese students that are in China who are unable to travel to Australia, that would be a test bed and an opportunity to, you know, evolve that student experience and the online element to what will be a blurred system eventually.
Yeah, possibly. And I think, you know, it may end up that we find that, for example, the online peer support program that we're running,
right,
that is something that we would probably say, well, that's a candidate for you know, turning into BAU in the future. It might have a different form and shape, but what a great innovation it would be. So you may find that some of the, I I guess the services or some of the experience that sits around the education experience are the ones that are in the ether. You know, that's pretty innovative and amazing stuff. The classes, yeah, look, you know, as I said, we've previously had online content and we will continue to have online content. But getting those in-person experiences, sitting in a tutorial, discussing ideas, talking to your lecturer, seeing these people, you know, in person is going to be a really important part of the experience.
Yeah, no doubt. Michael, look, thank you so much for making the time to talk to AustCham Shanghai. Good luck with what is obviously one of the most disrupted years in your sector, and we hope to see you back in China very soon.
I'm hoping to get back there soon. I'm counting on a period of quarantine, but that's just something I'll have to do. Part of the new world at the moment.
Exactly.
I hope the food's decent, but we'll see.
We will see. Well, thanks very much, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jack. Great to talk to you.